We're so glad you joined us today. Representative Lance Russell talks with us about economic uncertainties, and Romney gets personal with Randazzo. Senator Bill Napoli talks about South Dakota politics, and you'll hear from Chief Justice of the People's Court, Judge Brad Morgan. Stay tuned. I can't think of anybody in South Dakota who has more impeccably strong conservative credentials than you, Representative Lance Russell. I have watched as you've demonstrated a steady hand and unwavering, resolute determination to move forward with conservative, responsible positions. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that somebody's actually noticing that I'm
well,
that I'm at least trying to do what Ronald Reagan and the others taught us. So.
I think you're doing very well. And I'd like to talk with you a little bit today, Lance, about how this legislature, how this administration, how our state government is going to deal with, in the next 2 years, the economic uncertainties. And we are being hit from every side. What is the response of state government likely to be, and how can we make certain it goes in the right direction?
Well, and that's my greatest concern as we move forward, and it's been my greatest concern since I've been in the legislature. This economic uncertainty brought on by Obamacare and the idea that we're going to end the Bush tax cuts and other things that essentially have kept our economy afloat for a number of years it may all come to an end, and we may be in a very serious situation even here in South Dakota. We like to paint a rosy picture of our economic forecast here in the state.
Well, and it looks kind of good right now. There's a few dollars left over.
That's correct.
But
it's few.
Yes,
when you consider that we have a $4 billion budget and we may have a $16 million surplus mid-year, anything can change on the dime, especially if we have a spike in oil prices, if the Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz or something of that nature happens.
Or the Black Hills
goes in fire.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are a million things that can happen, and unfortunately we aren't in a very economically stable time.
With a $16 million surplus, that gets us about 2 weeks into our budget, because we spend $10 or $11 million a day on state government in South Dakota. So a $16 million surplus might sound like a lot, but 2 weeks isn't very much of a reserve, is it?
No, it won't go very far, and that's why it's so important that we in the legislature continue the program that, for instance, Governor Mickelson put in place, where we have 5% of our entire budget in essentially a ready reserve in case we do have problems. And in the last session, there was an effort early on to spend us down to about 1 or 2%. Rather than the 5% that Mickelson wanted. Thank goodness there was some additional revenue and we didn't do that. But there was a very strong effort to do that from the administration and the leadership in Pierre.
Is that right?
It is.
Well, now that's alarming, because in my tenure, the 6 years I served, there was always pressure from the other side of the aisle to spend the reserves. But now you're saying the leadership and the administration, the Republicans last year, were pressing to spend it.
Yes, to spend Mickelson's 5% that he always kept in place as what he called a rainy day fund.
That's
and
alarming.
We didn't do that, but there was at the beginning of the session a very serious effort to do that.
There's a willingness, isn't there?
There was a willingness.
It's not an anxiousness.
Well, I don't know if I would deem it anxiousness, but there was certainly a willingness to spend us down to 2% of what we, instead of having a 5%.
So instead of a 2-week reserve, they would have bled it down to be about a 1-week reserve.
Wouldn't have been very long.
My goodness. With the catastrophic things that seem to be looming on the horizon, on a worldwide basis and national, our dollar, we don't know where we're going to go. And we've got to have conservative, steady hands at the helm, don't we?
We really do, and it's important that we not as for instance on highway funds, that we don't just resort to the easy way out, which is a 10-cent a gallon gas tax increase that some have proposed in the past.
Yes, just increase the taxes.
And unfortunately, there are more legs to that business in Pierre than what we would even like to admit.
Yes.
It has been killed in the past, but it has been last minute and only by the skin of our chinny chin chin.
The margins are becoming more narrow every year.
They certainly are, as to whether or not we will raise taxes on the people. And I think that that will have a deleterious or a bad effect on our economy and our ability to recruit businesses and to also grow our businesses here in South Dakota, and thus jobs.
Well, you've all experienced the impact of the decline in jobs, the economic decline of the dollar. Our buying power just isn't what it once was.
No.
And now we're hearing that even the Republican leadership in South Dakota is ever closer to a willingness to spend our reserves down rather than just exercise conservative fiscal responsibility. These are alarming days. We need conservatives like Representative Lance Russell. Thanks for being there, Lance, and thank you for tuning in today.